special advisor to the president on information and strategy, Bayo Onanuga, says Obi, who was a beneficiary of the Supreme Court judgment in the past, contradicted himself by criticizing the same court because its judgment did not go his way. He accused Obi of making false allegations of rigging and other electoral malpractices for which he could not produce any evidence to back up at both the Court of First Instance and at the Apex Court. Onanuga welcomes Obi and his party to play the role of the opposition and start preparing for another shot at the presidency in 2027.
Well, in another reaction, the National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, Felix Morka, accused Peter Obi of having an arrogant sense of entitlement. He says Obi is confused by the mass hysteria of his vociferous netizens and fringe supporters. End quote. Well, joining us now is Arise Director of News and Politics, Sumner Sambo. Good to see you, Sumner. And a fine moment now for us to start looking at some of the former vice president had spoken, and now we're seeing from the former candidate of the Labour Party also speaking. He spoke specifically, let's touch on some of the key issues. He said something about going back to how Nigeria started, the parliamentary system.
Yeah, between 1960 and 1963, the parliamentary system was the one we started our governance with as a nation. It has its own challenges, actually, and it can be so rancorous, very rowdy, actually, compared to what we have now under the presidential system. But the advantage of that is that the government is not bloated because ministers are taken from parliament. So you're a member of parliament and then you're also in the executive. So the legislature has an overwhelming bearing on the executive decisions. And then there's what's called collective responsibility. So if any member of government, a minister in the government actually misbehaves or does the government bad, there's a tendency that the government will go down. So everybody from the prime minister down to each member of the cabinet as a minister, everybody works together in harmony to ensure that there is no breakdown of trust from the people, because once there is, the elections can be called upon at any time, unlike this one that we have to wait until after every 4 years. And then the advantage of that parliamentary system is what Peter Obi had mentioned, the PMQs, like we know it in the UK, Prime Minister Question Time, where the Prime Minister is brought in. Like what happens now in the UK is that every Wednesday at 12 noon, the Prime Minister is brought in for about 30 minutes. Each member of parliament will actually ask questions, specifically the House of Commons, like the House of Representatives, ask question, how is the government going, what is going on? So you will see that the Prime Minister will have to answer those questions. But the disadvantage here is that you don't get to question the head of state, because in the parliamentary system, there are two different leaders that actually govern the country. There's a head of state, and then there's a prime minister. So the head of state, like for example, is the king now, King Charles in the UK. Yes. So you can't really question certain things. You can't, it's a no-go area. If you go to Ethiopia, it's like the president of the country. So it's more of a ceremonial person. But the prime minister would have to be questioned during such periods. And it could be very rascally at times. I mean, if you watch what happens in the parliament, you see the opposition throwing brickbats here and there. But it puts the leader of government in check.
It makes you wonder why we dropped the parliamentary system.
Yeah, and it's because we're not asking our leaders. Our leaders don't have any time to talk to us. Like former President Buhari, I mean, he was so reticent when it comes to talking to the people. Presidential media chats are near absent. And if care is not taken, we may actually have that happening under the Tinubu presidency. So we must look for a platform where the president comes to speak to the people, because you saw their votes. That's the advantage of the parliamentary system.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about some of the points that he raised. The issue of one term of 5 years. How workable is that? Of course, he also mentioned restructuring. We discussed that the last time you were here.
I mean, these are the offshoots of the Alex Ekweme report during the 1995 Constitutional Conference, where he had advocated for this to go around. And I mean, all the geopolitical zones, but the 6 geopolitical zones would have had a shot. But I'm thinking that 5 years is actually too small. based if we want to insist on that one term. Because it's not just for the fun of sending someone there, but you also need to
4 years.
No, because
if a government is not behaving well, it's not performing.
There are deliverables that each government would have to, and that's why that 8 year is there for 2 terms of 4 years for you to have an 8-year period to be able to achieve much. So, but if you are depriving the person of having 8 years, then of course a sort of a little bit past the midway could help time, because once you get into power, for example, there are distractions from the court and people trying to learn how to get into government, even your ministers, the National Assembly. So the first year is lost. So the second year you are preparing budgets, trying to understand how to govern, and before you know it, there are challenges there. So the real time that we enjoy government or governance, actually even within this one term of 4 years, is from the second year. So, and before you know, after the second year, going to the third year again, you're already seeking a revalidation. So if it's like 6 years, I mean, it gives you room to be able to do that. Because when former President Goodluck Jonathan brought this idea, it was widely criticized and accepted by different people, including the current people who are in power now, who were known as the progressives and all of that. Now, the issues of restructuring is something that is important. The 1963 Constitution actually made us to practice what people call fiscal federalism today. So you have 50% of whatever you produce, and then you send 50% to the center, because it made people to compete together. That's why the Ahmadu Bello Stadium, you go to the Cocoa House and all those buildings, you could see Michael Okpara thriving. Do you know that the economy of the Southeast was competing with a lot of the countries that we're trying to catch up with today? Asian Tigers and all of that.
So quickly.
But because we don't do that, there's no competition. People just wait for federal posts to be sent in, and then there's a problem.
Because listening to you drawing up these analysis, it tells one thing: democracy is not a one-size-fits-all. We can create our own style, kind of democracy.
Very well, and that's why he's saying that there should be a quasi system. If we can't adopt the parliamentary system, then we should have a system where the chief executive of state, being the president, should come to the parliament. And that's why there was a bill introduced by former Senator Ike Ekweremadu, who was deputy senate president, including, I think, Babafemi Ojudu also, then as senator. There was a State of the Nation address where the president should come and address people in parliament, the National Assembly. What is the state of our country? What are you doing about it? What are the ministers doing? If they are underperforming, what are you doing? How do we control our debt and all of that? But we don't get these questions being answered. And if you have reticent leadership who just get in there, God help you, you will have to wait till the next 4 years before voters can take a decision again.
There you go. There you go. Sumner Sambo, Arise Politics Editor, Director of News. Thank you very much, as always.